let us know where you are.
They're here, they're also up front on the registration table.
Wonderful. Boy, there's a man who doesn't need a mic. Well done, Doug. And so if you would like to speak, we're going to ask people to limit themselves to 3 minutes so that we can learn as much as possible from as many people as possible. With that, I think it would be, could we do a roll call in a way where we're actually doing introductions of our commissions? Or do we have to do the formal roll call? Why don't we start at the end then with a member of the Washington Commission, and we'll make that our roll call. Welcome.
Dan O'Neill from Mason County, Hood Canal, Washington State.
Jerry Litt. I'm from Wenatchee, Washington, the east side of Washington State.
Roy Jennings, Washington State, Vancouver, Washington.
Joe Tortorelli, and I'm from Spokane, the far eastern part of the state.
And I'm Rima Griffith. I'm the Executive Director, and I'm located in Olympia, Washington.
I'm Ann Haley. I'm from Walla Walla, which is the Napa of Washington.
And the home of Chief Joseph, correct? Yes. Carl Guardino. I'm from right here in Silicon Valley and on the California Transportation Commission.
Andre Boutros, Executive Director, California Transportation Commission.
I'm Lucy Dunn, California Transportation Commission, and also from Orange County, the 6th most populous county in the United States.
And the most attractive.
I'm Joe Tavaloni. I go through her county quite often, and I'm proud to say that I'm part of Joe down at the other end. I'm from the Inland Empire, Riverside, California, Southern California.
Fran Inman, and I actually live in the OC, as Lucy hails from, but I work in Los Angeles in the Inland Empire.
I am Jim Arp. I live in the Sacramento region, and happy to be here.
Yvonne Burke at Los Angeles.
Hi, I'm Jim the Dapper from the city of San Diego, sunny San Diego, the other end of the
Good morning, Darius Assemi from Fresno, California, also known as Eastern California. Glad to be here amongst you this morning. All the pistachios and almonds that you enjoyed come from Central California, by the way.
But did you bring them?
We're waiting for the CTC hearing in Fresno, California, to host everyone that attends with enough supply of pistachios and almonds.
Good morning. Brian Annis, the Undersecretary with the California Transportation Agency.
And Malcolm Doherty, the Director of Caltrans, which is the California Department of Transportation.
Great. Thank you. Doug, would you still like to do a roll call, or does that suffice? Excellent. We are going to start our morning with an in-depth conversation around road usage charges, and for an overview on international and national efforts from the Western States Consortium, we have Jack Opiola with D'Artagnan Consulting and Jeff Doyle with the Washington State Department of Transportation. Jack and Jeff, welcome.
Thank you. I can control the slides from the podium. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to spend a very quick, I hope everybody has had their coffee this morning, because I'm going to go through this very rapidly. If not, Rima is going to have my hide, because she said I only had so many minutes, and I had too many slides, so we'll see if I can get through the slides in time. But I'm going to talk about two distinct things, and I'm going to cover international and national in the process, but I'm going to talk about setting objectives and demonstration testing. And many times those are spoken of in separate terms But when you're looking at a road usage charging program, and as been demonstrated internationally and nationally, they're very connected, and I'll draw that in the conclusion. So I'll talk about setting objectives, I'll talk about demonstration, and then I'll show you how it's all tied together. Essentially, setting any type of program, especially a wicked problem like road usage charging, you're going to have a lot of basic questions that you have to answer to your stakeholders, to the public, and probably to yourselves. And the common ones are here. You know, what is it? How much does it cost? How is it going to impact me? How is it going to impact my business? And in effect, by setting objectives and by jumping into a program and demonstration, these are what you're trying to answer both to decision makers and to the public. There's a process. And as a consultant, you can expect that we always like to have things that are process-driven. But it really is a process that ties together very neatly. You need overarching goals and objectives in order to tie the program together, but more importantly, it's going to tell people what are you doing and why are you doing it. And then you need to translate those broader objectives into design criteria for the system so that you can tell people how it'll operate. And finally, by demonstrating these, you're going to get a chance to show people precisely how it's going to cost and how it's going to affect them. So when you start getting objectives, there's lots of reasons why people have done road usage charging. Some of them have been to raise revenue. And you don't have to do all of these. Many times they're combined, but in effect, just the fact that you're trying to address revenues, it could be that simple. In some cases, we've had people that have tried to look at it for congestion relief, economic efficiency, to improve the environment. All of those have been valid objectives used worldwide. And then somewhere along the line, you have to figure out how ambitious do we want to be with the program, how fast do we want it to run, and what are we trying to achieve from it. These are a list, and I apologize for the small print, but we did a scan of the world of everybody that's done the road usage charging. What's interesting are things that come out as the more common reasons why it's been done. The public perceived that it was needed. Somebody did a campaign in the beginning to tell people that this is something we need to do to change the system. There's a problem. The system's broke or broken, and we need to do something to fix it. We have a planned program that this is part of, and it's connected with our other programs. It's tied with our environmental objectives. It's tied to our overall rebuild or regeneration of our road network. And there's somebody that's in charge of it. But the ones that are fitting above the bar have been the more common ones. And these are in your packet, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. When we look worldwide, we see programs, and you'll hear of programs like London that was addressing congestion because it was an urban environment. Durham, a lot of people miss Durham in the UK, but it was done for congestion reduction. Singapore, congestion reduction and improvement and efficiency of the system, and to get a modal shift to people to take public transport. And then you get people like Stockholm, Italy, which is very interesting because they were trying to preserve the historic nature of towns like Pisa, where they wanted to cut down the traffic coming into the town, and also to meet environmental objectives. In fact, in Italian law, a mayor, when he took office, could be sent to jail at the end of his term if he didn't improve the environment during the term of his office. Now, the other thing is that in Italy, you can pay somebody to serve your term in jail. You talk about New Zealand, which has an operational ruck system. They've had the longest running operational ruck system since the late 70s, and in fact, it's been continually improved. And then we have Oregon, the first one in the U.S. They've passed legislation and moving to an implementation in 2015. Jim Whitty's going to speak about that. Work that we're doing in Washington State, looking at a sustained revenue source to replace the gas tax. And California, to be determined. The one thing I will say, regardless of how you do this, you let your policy objectives lead the program. You do not get sidelined with technology. It's too easy to get sidelined with technology. It's seductive. People want to talk about it. It's sexy. It's interesting. But you get your policy right first, and the technology will follow. London congestion charging. There were really 10 things in the mayor's program. The top 4 bullets indicate what he was trying to do with the congestion charge, but additionally it was to raise revenue and improve the environment. The Netherlands had a very interesting set of objectives. They were actually tests. The parliament said, we'll do this provided the cost of the onboard equipment is less than 100 euros, that your operating costs will be less than 5 or 6%. We want commercial entities to be involved with this, so we want it in the hands of commercial entities. And the money that's collected by the commercial entities has to be swept into Treasury within 24 hours. And that actually was the undoing of their system because that was too short a time frame. And lastly, the revenues collected would be used first for the overall improvement of the highway system and then other transport improvements. So again, objectives can also be tests. Oregon has a long history. They've been working on this since about 2001. Here you see their statutory directives in 2001 and then how they changed in 2011. But when we started working with Jim Whitty in Oregon, the one thing that he gave us as the superordinate was to pass legislation. What do we have to do to pass legislation? And then the rest of these got to be design criteria. And here's the design principles that we were given. And in here you see protect privacy, a base system design on an open architecture, promote compliance, nice way of saying we had to have a very strong enforcement regime, and establish public-private partnerships. So these superordinate, and these were the design criteria that translated into how do we build the system. In Washington State, they want a sustainable revenue source. They want a replacement for the gas tax, and they want that replacement to be sustainable. But below that, there's a whole list of state guiding principles. And again, much like Oregon, these guiding principles were there to help with the system design, moving towards, we don't know at this point in time, because no one has said that there's going to be an implementation. It's just that they're looking that this is one financing alternative that is on the table, and it's a prominent one on the table. So let's translate this then. Why do you do a demonstration? You have these design principles. Why do you want to do this? Well, the big thing is that we learn in different ways. And we've seen programs where people get up, tell me all about the benefits of the program, and either because the source or the fact that you can't tell people what the benefits are going to be unless they actually live those benefits and realize those benefits from the system. So in our learning process, a demonstration is a way to bring the benefits of the system home to the individual. And unless the participants experience it, they won't believe you. And then you want to use those participants to be your spokespeople to tell the rest of the public, because they'll believe a participant, they may not believe you. And you can do different demonstrations. You can do a small, medium, large, and I've just broken these up arbitrarily. You know, if you want to do a small demonstration, this is a bit like what Jim did this last time in Oregon, because he had previously a larger demonstration, and he was trying to prove out new principles. And that's generally why you use a small demonstration. If you want to do a large demonstration or a larger demonstration, a medium-sized one, you're going to be trying to prove that a concept works. You may not show the whole system, but only those pieces that the public or the decision makers are concerned with. If you want to demonstrate the full system from A to Z, you're then going to do a large test, and you're going to prove it not only to the public, but you're also going to get a chance over a longer period of time to realize benefits that may be hidden in a smaller test. Seasonal variances. We have many places from the boards in both states where you have people coming to the beach, coming to the island, using the ferries that are higher in the winter than in the summer. Those may not show up in a medium or small size test, but they will show up in a large size test. So if you want to ensure success, here's a list of bullets that why systems have failed. And in a lot of cases, it's because you truncate the process. You're in such a rush to get to the end that you rush through it and you overlook things. So I would certainly advise caution if you're thinking of a demonstration or moving towards a demonstration. If you were looking at a small demonstration, and I'll use California as an example, a small one may be 100 to 400 people in one area. It probably takes you about 3 months to plan, about 3 to 4 months to execute it. And you can show a couple of technologies, 1 or 2, and you may do evaluations at the beginning and the end in order to get feedback. But because of the small size, your sample size may come in question. You're looking at a large test, you may be talking about a medium test that's 1,000 to 2,000, and you may use multiple regions so you can see what happens north or south. You may have a big concentration like a San Francisco metro area and then a smaller area outside. There you can probably show 4 or 5 different technologies, and you're probably going to want to do 3 evaluations, beginning, middle, and end. If you look at a large demonstration, you're looking at something that's 5,000 or 6,000 participants. And again, that may be over multiple regions. It's going to take you about 9 to 10 months to plan it, and if you're going to execute it, let's just say it's a year. So you're talking about something that's going to extend out 20 or 22 months. You can test multiple technologies, and this is where the sample size and the participants link. Because if you have 5 or 6 different technologies spread out over 5,000 or 6,000 people, you have to get the right mix to get the right results in the evaluation, or your statistical results will be off. So by comparison, this is how a small, medium, and large compare. And again, there's no proper way to do it. It's up to you. But it's what you want to accomplish that should guide you. So in conclusion, let me tie this together. You're going to go through multiple phases. You're going to want to set overall objectives and guiding principles. And then you're going to want to plan your demonstration to tie into that. And in the first phase, those objectives are going to shape what you're going to do in the demonstration. And then the overall methodology to approach road pricing demonstration is going to be shown in phase 2, but it's always going to link back to your objectives. You're going to want to prove out your objectives. They should be core to what you're setting up as a demonstration. And then when you run it, you're going to evaluate it, and no secret, those evaluations are going to go back and answer the questions of your objectives. And finally, when you're done, the final report should link all the way back to your primary objectives and give legislators and key decision makers answers to those basic questions we started with. And then you'll have a very successful objective setting and demonstration, as has been proven in places like New Zealand and London and Stockholm and places around the world. So, objectives and desired criteria, charging options and setting the timeline for the test, evaluation and preferred options, and a final report are the deliverables that you get out of linking objectives with the demonstration. And of course, all of that's going to go into the basis of your policy and your legislation. Thank you. Do you want to hold questions to the end? Because it may help.
If you think it will help, and that's your recommendation, unless there's a burning question, then we will take your advice and hear from your colleague.
Jeff, I don't know how we
By the way, that was excellent. Thank you.
They are really good.
I can tell.
They are really, really good.
Yeah. Good morning.
Get them if you can.
Try and navigate to the next presentation. Perfect. Well, good morning, Chair Guardino, Chair Haley, members of the Washington and California Transportation Commissions. My name's Jeff Doyle. I'm Director of Public-Private Partnerships for the Washington State DOT. We are, in our state, partnered with our Transportation Commission in exploring road usage charges. You're going to hear more about that in a few moments from Rima Griffith of the Transportation Commission. I'm here today actually as chair of the Western Road Usage Charge Consortium. And this is a group of Western states that have opted into participating in a research organization in Western states. By Western states, I mean state DOTs. You can see the member states there. Today we have members of the board of our Road Usage Charge Consortium, Director Dockery, and in Washington State, Secretary Lynn Peterson. The directors of all of the DOTs comprise the board of the Western Road Usage Charge Consortium. The day-to-day work, though, is done by a steering committee, and we have members of the steering committee. In fact, at the front table, there are Norma Ortega from California and Jim Whitty from Oregon. This organization was formed
not to implement or even pursue road usage charge, but it was designed to allow departments of transportation a forum to learn about road usage charging, whether your state is interested in wanting to pursue it or you're just a neighboring state that needs to understand how it's going to affect you and your citizens. It's also turning out to be a very excellent mechanism for joint funding of research projects that are of interest to one or more states. And every year, we've only had 1 year of operations, but we've just completed our first year of operations, and we have identified a core work plan, which consists of some research projects that each state can choose to participate in, and I'm going to describe those for you in a moment, including one project that's actually underway. First, I apologize for how small that font is, but what this is a description of how it is that the state DOTs come together and identify projects of mutual interest. In the first year of operations, it's very easy because none of us, except for perhaps Oregon, has done this before. We have lots of questions, and we need to understand how such a system might affect not only the state DOTs and their operations, but the state's finances and our citizens themselves. So we have a long list of conceptual ideas or questions that we would like to have researched. From there, each state sponsored or took responsibility, really, for drafting a detailed project proposal. And once we teased out a little bit what those research questions are related to road usage charges, then we went through a process where the member states examined all of the scopes of work and the questions that were asked, and basically they ranked them based on importance. In other words, the level of impact that this question could have on our various states, the timing or the urgency of the question. Some are more urgent and in front of us than others. And then finally on cost effectiveness, because as you'll see in a moment, several states were willing not only to contribute their membership dues, but also supplement their membership dues with additional sources of revenue to fund the research program. So from there, we took and adopted, well, actually we haven't adopted it yet, but we have a list of potential projects. And on the screen here, you'll see eight projects that are under consideration. We're very close to have commitment, at least on 7 of the 8 projects, to fully fund these questions. Oregon DOT, who is our administrator state, then would proceed to finding either consultant help or perhaps university help, and largely the efforts of the different state agencies as well. A research consortium like this requires a lot of sweat equity to be able to undertake these types of questions. What I'd like to do real briefly is just highlight one of them. You'll see the third bullet down is the question of, in a road usage charge system, how do you deal with visiting drivers? If you are a state that has a road usage charge, your citizens are paying for a road usage charge. Now, what do you do about neighboring states that have drivers that are coming through your jurisdiction? So this was one project that has actually gone to contract, and the reason is because the Washington legislature specifically directed this analysis to be done, and they appropriated early money. They also required, by the way, that we, state of Washington, partner with a neighboring state. So our choices were Oregon and Idaho, and Oregon obviously was the first one to raise their hand. So Oregon also ponied up some money, and then we took it to the Western Road Usage Charge Consortium because there are other states, we have 6 participating in this project, need to know about this as well. Either because they are considering a road usage charge or because it might be their drivers who will be the motorist's journey into the neighboring state, and they want to understand how their citizens are going to be charged. So in this illustration, we have State A and State B. You could imagine that as California, Oregon, or something like that, where State B is the one that has a road usage charge system in this hypothetical, and State A does not. So you have the motorist who, on either a regular basis, if you have bordering cities, or on just an intermittent basis, perhaps tourism or recreational travel, is coming into the jurisdiction with a road usage charge. And so there are a number of questions that come from this. They're highlighted under issues to address how does the motorist interact with a system like this? How does the state deal with the out-of-state motorist? And then how do the states amongst themselves, not unlike tolling facilities that are by state, how do you reconcile the travel? How do you reconcile the revenues? And then a fourth question that has been put forth is how would potentially the private sector help in administering or carrying out services to assist a system like this? And this work is in progress. We have identified some initial policy options on how that might happen. They're listed below. Everything ranging from, if you're State B and you have a road usage charge system, you're just not going to worry about those out-of-state drivers. That's an option. Initially, it doesn't strike, at least in our state, Washington, legislators or our commission all that favorably, but it's possible. Secondly, you could have a shadow charge, which is essentially to the drivers, it's transparent. They're not going to pay anything. Among state organizations or government organizations, perhaps we have a reconciliation. We have some means of figuring out who's driving in whose jurisdiction, and there's some sort of accounting of the revenues. Again, these are all options that are being pursued by the research team now. The third is, quite frankly, a fuel-based charge, and that's what we have now. We don't worry we don't worry that much if drivers in Washington State fuel up in Idaho and they happen to cross the border, or they frequently cross the border. We just assume that the existing gas tax mechanism is sufficient to take care of that, and everyone in the end comes out more or less whole because you're paying gas taxes somewhere. There are obviously some downsides of that, namely the fact that the reason we're considering road usage charge is because fuel taxes are going to become less and less directly related to road usage. The last two is a time-based charge. This would be similar to a permit in Europe. I think Jack described, they're referred to as vignette systems. It can be for a day, it can be for a week, it can be for a month, a year. You could choose the time period in which the out-of-state visitor could drive and pay for that driving. And then finally would be some sort of distance-based charge, which would be an awful lot like a RUC, a road usage charge. And so these are the policy options that are being explored right now. Just so you know, here's the project schedule and what the deliverables are. You can see Washington and Oregon, California is a participant, Texas, Montana, and Colorado have all committed their staff and resources to help the research team explore this. One of the great things about the Western Road Usage Charge Consortium is whether or not you participate in this particular study, if you're a member state, then you have all the benefits of learning from those that just conducted the study. So we have all of the other states, the other 5 that are currently members, who will, although it won't be tailored to their state specifically, the results of the research will benefit them because they'll be able to see, well, we're a lot more like, say, Colorado than we are like California, so this is how this might impact us. In this case, we have a reporting date, a report back date to the consortium steering committee of this fall, and that's how we envision these projects to be undertaken. Now, this is only one of the 7 or 8 that we have under consideration. This one had early start money, but we're hopeful that over the next year or perhaps 2 that we will be able to have a good basis for you all to consider when you engage in policy making or fiscal decisions on road usage charges. That's really all I have to describe the Western Road Usage Charge Consortium for today. I would like to mention Norma Ortega is, again, on the steering committee in California for the California Commissioners, and in Washington State. I am presently, although I'm leaving WashDOT, and so they have yet to do their search to make a designation to replace me. The chair of the board of the Road Usage Charge Consortium is Director Garrett, Matt Garrett from Oregon DOT, and Oregon DOT also, quite frankly, props up the administration of the Road Usage Charge Consortium by contributing professional administrative staff to administer it. And that's all I have today, and I look forward to your questions a little bit later.
Thank you. Why don't we move forward then with Jim Whitty with Oregon DOT. And again, if we write down those questions, unless there are burning questions, both from people on the dais as well as audience members can fill out those cards. Jim Whitty, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair Giardino, Chair Haley, members of California Transportation Commission and Washington Transportation Commission, I'm pleased to be here. I've spoke to the Washington Transportation Commission extensively in last December, and of course the California Transportation Commission in January. But there's really no concern. I'm going through some new stuff here, although I understand that there's some new people on both commissions. So we're going to have to do what both Andre and Rima suggested, which distill the Oregon 12-year effort down into 30 minutes. I'm up to the challenge. Okay, here we go. All right. So let's get on the same page first. How do you use this thing? All right. Anybody know? What's right? 31. Oh, no. Oh. Okay, there we go. All right. There are many reasons to proceed on a road usage charge for a nation or a state, but in Oregon, in Washington, and California, the reason tends to be that the revenues are drying up from the fuel tax. It is a motivation for change, and we see that the fuel tax revenue situation will be getting worse because of changes to the nation's vehicle fleet, and that improvement will continue over time as these new vehicles come to market. This is also pushed then by the federal government policy of improving the corporate average fuel economy standard of 54.5 miles per gallon beginning in 2025. But we have in May something quite interesting. We have the report by the U.S. Energy Information Administration about fuel usage and VMT. We've heard that VMT is going down. That's been the news throughout the land, and then it's been used as an argument not to go to road use or per mile charge. But what we're going to learn here, well, let's just look at this graph here. When you look at overall VMT, the situation is quite different. What they've been talking about with VMT going down is per driver. This is the history of recent history of overall VMT. We see there was a big increase in the for a 10-year period, 95 to 2005, 1.7% annual increase. And then that fell off a bit, 0.7% annual increase because of the recession up to 2012. But the base case that the U.S. Energy Information Administration developed Uh-oh. Yeah, it's not working. Sorry, Mr. Chair, we have technical difficulties. All right. I'm just going to roll with it. It isn't in the order I suggested, but that's just fine. The reference case suggests that VMT overall will go up 0.9% over the next 25 years. And they have a high and a low VMT estimate as well, so if driving is higher, they estimate 1.1% increase, and then lower is 0.2. So even the low case indicates that the demand on a roadway system is will be greater than it is today. That's the most important thing. Okay, if we go into what I think is the most critical slide they present, is what's happening with vehicle energy use. As you know, the gas tax is a volume-based tax. So if energy use goes down, tax revenues go down. So we have a history here of we've had energy use go up till 2005, then the recession hit, and at 2012, we're averaging 21.5 miles per gallon at that date per vehicle. The reference case has us at 37.2 miles per gallon by 2040. So that's quite a jump. That's about, 75% jump in fuel efficiency improvements by 2040. What happened to the 54.5, you might ask? That is a new vehicle number. This is an overall all-vehicle number. So we can see that fuel efficiency is expected to improve, dramatically outstrip increases in the vehicle miles traveled. If we look at the low VMT case, it's even lower, and that would be an 18% improvement in fuel efficiency, and then even the high VMT case is a 5% difference. So the situation is revenues are going down no matter what. This is overall energy use, okay? This includes electricity energy use. So if we're relying on a volume-based system, we are in trouble. That's motivation for change. Okay. Because of this motivation for change, Oregon legislature adopted the per-mile charge road, law in 2013, and it directs implementation of a fully operational system by July 1, 2015. But let's go back a little bit for those of the new folks. We actually started our effort in 2001 when the Oregon legislature adopted a law requiring ODOT to do pilot programs on road use charging, and we did initially the pay-at-the-pump model, which allowed, we used GPS devices innocently. Nobody knew what the public reaction was going to be. We actually protected privacy with our approach, but the public reaction was huge. It was all collected at the pump. We abandoned it, but the issues that were raised with that pilot, privacy protection was prominent. There was concerns about a stagnant government bureaucracy and that compliance would be complex. There would be costly operations, and then fairness was always raised in different contexts. Rural drivers would drive a lot and therefore would be hurt, they said. Fuel-efficient vehicles would also be hurt. And then there's what do you do with the non-resident drivers? So those were the issues raised, and I will take each one of these in turn. But initially, I want to tell you what happened to this pay-at-the-pump model. We started over from scratch because we had to. All right, and redesigned it according to these principles. We needed an open system. The pay-at-the-pump model was a closed system. There was only one way to do it, and we needed options. We needed the ability to have the marketplace take over. Plus, motorists need choices, we learned. Choices really help with acceptance of the system rather than having only one way to do it and assign a government box for your car. That didn't work. Okay, also use the private sector to do transaction processing. The private sector is very capable in this way, and they should be used to help with the mileage charge collection. Protection of personally identifiable information. There needed to be actual legal restrictions and protections built into the law. And finally, we decided to create a flexible system that was scalable to any level and could be used not only in Oregon, but in other states. Okay. We did a second pilot that took these concepts in 2012 and 13. And we built it into a pilot that had choices. There were 44 volunteer participants. 8 of them were state legislators, which helped with the legislative effort in 2013. They paid a road usage charge, actually paid 1.5 cents per mile, and received a fuel tax credit. The private sector firms came in and were provided the mileage reporting technologies as well as the tax processing and account management. And Washington DOT and Nevada DOT were able to access the system for their participants to show that this is geographically unlimited. This led to, the categories of mileage reporting that were used in the pilot were 4. First of all, reporting all miles driven, which we called basic reporting. There was no GPS technology whatsoever in that mileage reporting equipment. Number 2, reporting miles by location, which we called advanced, and there was a GPS element to that one. The third one, changeable, which we also called switchable, was able to go back and forth between the two at the personal preference of the motorist. And finally, fourth, we had an ability to assume a maximum number of miles driven, which was set at 35,000 miles per year, which we called simplified because it resulted in a flat fee. Nobody had to do anything with reporting. They simply paid it and they were finished. This all led, it was successful, led to enactment of the law I mentioned earlier. And these are some of the elements of it. 1.5 cents per mile will be charged a rebate, a fuel tax paid. Mileage reporting choices is actually in the law. So we cannot have one method, we have to have multiple methods. And vehicle location technology, or GPS, is not required. In fact, we cannot mandate GPS in the program. Open system is also in the law, required. And there's a private sector administration option which must be had or developed into the system. That's in the law. As a tax bill, so penalties are also part of it for those that want to cheat. And then protection of personally identifiable information. First application will be 5,000 voluntary taxpayers on July 1, 2015. This is not a policy statement. This is a strategy. This is a final demonstration before mandatory taxpayers are added later. Okay. So let's talk about the issue I raised earlier, privacy. How did Senate Bill 810 deal with that? By providing choices for reporting method and technology, this calms down the issue. People can choose whether to use GPS or not. They can choose their mileage reporting device from the marketplace. It won't be a government-issued box. That's important. There's no mandate, as I mentioned, for GPS. That calms the issue down quite a bit. And then a legal obligation to protect personally identifiable information. Let's look into that. The law constrains the use of personally identifiable information that are used in the program, limits access to those in the chain of payment, and poses an obligation to protect it. There's an exception, however, if a motorist wants to give express approval to use it for a specific purpose, then they can do that. And then we negotiated this provision with the American Civil Liberties Union in Oregon, and the ACLU said if you add data destruction to the law, then we can remove our objection. And they did. So we developed a process for destroying the data within 30 days after later of payment processing, dispute resolution, or noncompliance investigation. And that enabled the ACLU to go before the committee and say, we have no objections to this bill. That was huge to passing legislation. Okay. We are starting the third pilot, and it mirrors the bill I mentioned earlier. We call it the third pilot. It's really a fully operational system, but the legislators are calling it a pilot, which I did not like at the time, because I thought, this is a fully operational system. Let's call it that. Then I realized what they meant by pilot. This is still an experiment. We don't have mandated taxpayers yet, but that's the next thing they will do once this thing is proven to be easy and simple and works well. So it'll have an open system with taxpayer choices, 1.5 cents per mile, and a fuel tax credit, 5,000 volunteers, and the private sector firms are providing all of the most of the work. Okay, let's talk about the platform. That platform Oregon is building. It's essentially a machine-to-machine communications via something called the standard mileage message, which is how machines talk to each other. We've developed it for this purpose. ODOT will certify private sector entities under an open system to provide the mileage reporting and tax processing and account management. And this is a rudimentary chart of what's happening. The data comes from the car, goes to an account manager, and the account manager will either be an ODOT account manager or commercial account manager, that are certified by ODOT. They'll report to ODOT for purposes of accounting and enforcement, and the dollars go to the Treasury. Okay. But this is the background documentation we've been developing over the course of the last year or more, developing detailed system requirement specifications and business requirement specifications that will obligate the vendors to follow certain processes that are acceptable to ODOT. There's also something called an interface control document, which is how the technology works together, specifically laid out. And then something called a verification cross-reference index, which captures every element that the vendor has to do, the 302 elements the vendor has to do to comply and be an ODOT account manager. And this will all be captured by service level agreements. They'll have to go through certification of technologies and systems and business processes before they can proceed and be account managers for ODOT. Okay. Let's go to issue number 2, The challenge or the charge that the road use charge will be a stagnant government bureaucracy. Well, the solution we've identified here is bring in the private sector and create a market. Okay, that will not mean that it will not be a stagnant government bureaucracy because we're accessing the skills of private sector entities that are capable. So we're doing this two ways. An RFP that went out in May for the ODOT account manager. There'll be one winner. Somebody will step in the shoes of ODOT and perform ODOT's function as the government account management option. That side's going to be boring because there's only basic mileage reporting allowed. We don't want to have any GPS involvement on the government side. No value-added services, no pay-as-you-drive insurance, nothing. And they must accept every eligible applicant. On the RFQ side, however, a request for qualifications, that also was issued in May. That's the commercial market. That's where the exciting stuff will happen. They can use any type of mileage reporting equipment that's been certified. They can evolve technologies and business systems over time and have value-added services. It's a real market, and we have, I can tell you now, we have bidders that we've gone through since July 18th when the bids returned. We had 4 bidding entities, and I'm pleased to say that they're all capable. 2 of them are international tolling firms, and one of them is a well-known communications firm in the United States that nearly every household knows, as well as a telematics firm, I believe, with extensive operations in California. So tomorrow, actually, we begin negotiations at 9 a.m., so I have to go home after I present to get started with that. But we are excited about this opportunity. In March, we will reissue the commercial RFQ and keep it open so that the evolution of the commercial market can occur over time. So this means that this is not the end. These 4 are not the end. If there are firms that want to come in later because of exciting opportunities developed in the United States, then they will be able to do that. Okay. Let's talk about what the volunteers will see in the Oregon program. First, see marketing materials. Okay, that makes sense. Then they'll go to a website explaining the system, and they'll go to a choose your plan matrix to choose which mileage reporting option they want and which provider they want to use. Then they'll have the mileage reporting device activation instructions, either for the car in the car they already have or adding equipment to it, and finally an invoice with payment instructions. So let's see what that looks like. We expect mileage reporting methods to be 3, basic, advanced, and switchable. The high flat fee option is not included in the Senate Bill 810. That will probably be added later by the legislature. Refunds, there will be automatic refunds of the fuel tax, and because these devices can read fuel consumption in the vehicle. Manual refunds will be available for off-road, public road mileage for those choosing basic reporting. Okay, this is the matrix used in the second pilot, and it'll be something like that. It's very simple, actually. People can dig deeper by clicking. The pilot participants in 2012 had no problem choosing a plan. Then there'll be device activation, either a device already built into the vehicle, and there are many of those. Ford OnStar, Ford Sync, GM OnStar, Nissan Car Wings, it goes on and on and on. They can already do it, or they can install something added later. Invoicing and payment will be the same as for any other billing, except for they can receive it by email or by mail at their choice. Okay, let's go to the third issue, compliance complexity. Solution, let the RUC-payer choose simplicity. Simplicity is in the eye of the beholder. Preference is in the eye of the beholder. By offering options, a RUC-payer can create their own simplicity. If the government chooses simplicity, believe me, somebody will find fault with it. And so you let them choose their own simplicity. So choices really matter on this in the concept of road use charging. Issue number 4, cost. This is I wanted to put this forward so you see what it costs, at least in Oregon, to go forward on our efforts. The first pilot, 2006-2007, $2.9 million to get to that, and that includes policy development up to that point. 2.1 million of that was federal dollars. Since then, we've been on our own. Second pilot, we developed that over 14 months, and spent about 3.5 million for that second pilot, including all of the prep work. The third pilot we expect to be 5.5 million over 2 years. Costs go up when you have a per unit cost. So 5,000 drives the cost up. The more participants you have, the higher the cost. Now, over time, the cost of a fully operational rec system, these are estimates done by a financial and economic model we had prepared. With 10,000 rec payers, we are at 50% of revenues, which of course is not satisfactory. That's too low. But when you get to 100,000 payers, revenues get to a more acceptable level of 10% of revenues. But of course, you want to get to 1 million as fast as possible, because now you're below 5% of revenues, and that's the sweet spot. So we will not be able to get to 1 million very quickly in the state of Oregon, with only 3.7 million people. So we're looking for some help from other states. I'll be open about that. Okay, fairness, the final issue. Rural drivers object because road usage charge, they see, disadvantages them. But it's really a strange argument because they already pay the fuel tax. So there seems to be a disconnect there. And we did some surveying in the state of Oregon. We realized that their on public road miles are roughly the same as urban, only about 0.7% difference. But they do a lot more off-road driving than urban drivers do. There's also different kinds of rural. Along the coast in Oregon, they drive very short distances and don't have many miles per year. But out in the northeast wheat fields, they drive a lot. But still, they still drive, most of the difference is off-road driving. So, but the point is that rural drivers don't understand this. We have to develop a way to communicate this system, that the road use charging system doesn't really disadvantage them whatsoever. Fuel-efficient vehicle operators do see that they may pay more, and they will pay more under most design systems. But currently, they're not paying their fair share of the road use, and we've demonstrated that with my early charts. They already avoid the cost of fuel, however, so removing the tax savings does not remove all the incentive to drive a fuel-efficient vehicle. The cost of fuel is much, much higher than the tax. And even more so, the road usage charge is generally won't be a very high burden. In Oregon, for 10,000 miles, that's about $150 total, and it's not a big burden. Non-resident driving is a little tricky, except for even if you don't adopt policy for non-resident drivers, they'll still pay the fuel tax, and so there's nothing lost. But as Jeff Doyle said earlier, the Western Rec Consortium is addressing the solution for this. Okay, the timeline in Oregon going forward, we intend to contract with the ODOT account manager and the commercial account managers in October, and then go through a certification process for technologies and business practices that will run into the winter. And then we'll issue the permanent commercial account manager documents in March. We'll start an operational trial, which is to make sure the darn thing works before we go live in the spring. And then the launch will be July 1, 2015. And we're always available to assist other states in their analysis and understanding of the potential for road use charging for their state. Indeed, last week we had the Colorado Rec Academy in Portland. They brought 9 people out, including people from the Colorado Contractors Association. We had a good meeting. Okay. This isn't the only thing we're doing. In Oregon, we have a communications effort that I'm very excited about. We're actually going out and learning what people think about this. We're having focus groups. I had the first one on Saturday, and we're having 2 more this week with opponents. We want to learn why they oppose. I mean, specifically why. What is the underlying reason? Not just the gut reaction. Let's go down underneath so that we can learn something we don't know now, which is why the reaction is so negative for some people. We'll also develop and test a language to use when selling the program statewide. Because we passed the Senate Bill 810, we're able to sell the program statewide. And then we'll also use this as part of our recruiting efforts for the program to start July 1, 2015. Okay. This is my last slide, Mr. Chair. We do have a recommendation to other states, and I've done this in several states already, including Maine, as well as California, that the most important thing is to develop institutional knowledge within the state, including at the political level. And then once you've done that, policy has to come first. You can then access, if you want to do a pilot program, access Oregon's open system, which we've built for the purpose of allowing other states to come in and making doing a pilot a little bit easier than just starting from scratch. Believe me, starting from scratch is not easy at all. We built into our contracting documents that our vendors, the account managers, will be under contract, that they will be accessible by other states. It's right in the contract. And then the advantages are you'll save time, and you'll save money, and it's flexible, so you can design elements acceptable to your state. If California goes forward on a pilot and they want to look at ODOT's account managers, they can select one or several or all at their own decision. Or, and I want to be clear about this, in the state of California, you have lots of technology down here, lots of companies down here. We're going to have a procurement process that's going to be open, okay, and available next March. So any firm that says, wow, California's getting into this, maybe I want to get into this, maybe our firm wants to get into this, they'll be able to go to a certification in Oregon and available to California. All right, I want to be clear about that. What we have, if it's not quite right, and you all can come down here and find some firm and tickle them and get them all excited and invite them in, we're going to have a way to accept the invitation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Jim, that was outstanding. I think this might be a good time to do two things. First, we want to welcome and recognize Vincent Mamano, the Division Administrator for the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration. And Vincent, at any time, if you want to provide a federal perspective on these discussions, we would welcome you coming to the mic. Please just let us know. And second, we have absorbed so much from these three excellent speakers with Jack, Jeff, and Jim, getting us a level of knowledge. Before we go any further, I want to see if there are any questions from commissioners. I see hands on the south of the Washington border side, and now we're looking north as well. Vice Chair Dunn and Commissioner Medaffer, forgive me that I haven't got to know everyone's names here, but
Dan O'Neill.
I'm sorry?
Dan O'Neill.
Dan O'Neill. By the way, why are the Washington State commissioners dressed more like Silicon Valley without neckties than those of us from California?
Because
we changed.
Oh, okay.
It's hot down here.
I will take this off in just a few moments. Well done.
and you set the pace.
Good. Vice Chair Dunn.
Thank you, and thanks for introducing Vince, because I think that was my first question, is to ask, I love that the western states are leading in this review. Where are the feds in either participating or developing a separate program? Is there anything similar to this on the East Coast that's being done?
I'll tell you what I know. Actually, let's give him a pass. I don't want to put him on the spot. The U.S. DOT really doesn't have a congressional approval to go forward on this. So anything they're doing like underneath, just learning about it, and they're very careful about that. I think they're probably reading everything we write and put online, but we can't expect the U.S. DOT to step forward ahead of Congress. That doesn't make any sense. As far as the West or the East, other parts of the nation goes, we have the Indiana legislation that they have kind of a task force element, which is a good place to start. I don't know of other legislation east of the Rockies. I've spoken in a number of places like Maine and in Illinois and other places, and they're proceeding, but they're proceeding gingerly. So there is some jealousy, I understand, that the Western Road Usage Charge Consortium is really for the Western AASHTO states. And they're saying, well, wait a minute, why not us? So that's a good sign. There is a lot of interest, but it's hard to go forward. It's hard to know what the steps are to go forward. And in the West, because we have the Western RUC, we can do that easier. I suspect that at some point, once we've got on our legs, got on our feet, that there'll be maybe a request to open up the Western RUC to other states in the nation. And I suspect at some point the Board of Directors, maybe Malcolm Doherty can comment on this, but they'll probably open it up, I suspect.
One more quick question. Under the consumer choice...
Wait, you got to give me a chance to answer. You're not allowed to just jump into question
number 2. I didn't know you were going to talk, Vince.
Actually, if I recall correctly, in the Grow America Act, it's got a pilot to fund that, or federal funds to fund a pilot in that area. So the federal government is willing to try and help study that type of a thing, but Federal Highway isn't going to dictate anything right now.
Got it. Thank you, Vince.
Well, here's the good news to avoid workers' comp claims. Jim Whitty, I would just mention the most dangerous place in the room is to be between a microphone and Vince Milano.
I just experienced that.
There you go. And we love you for it, too, Vince.
One other quick question. Under the consumer choice, do they all require a device in their car, even if they choose not to use GPS? In other words, can you do like income tax self-reporting of your mileage, subject obviously to penalties? Talk a little bit about that.
Yes, that's something I missed, and I apologize for that. Basic reporting can be many different things. It can be electronic, like we're doing in Oregon, or it can be a manual approach. And especially since in a state where there's vehicle inspections, where you capture the mileage data, in some states they do it annually, you could easily do basic reporting that way. So basic reporting is wide open, and I think a state could have non-electronic means, definitely. Very, very much an option.
Thank you. Commissioner Medaffer?
Thank you very much. Is this on?
Yes.
You can't hear yourself talk. Excellent presentations. I had 3 questions. One, getting to the out-of-state drivers issue. I was just curious, I think about folks that are in Canada coming into Washington State, a truck or what have you, and they go back into Canada and they don't buy gas. It's a cabin vehicle. Or like in San Diego, LA market, people have come up from Mexico in a truck, moving goods into LA or the Inland Empire. They go back to Tijuana. Anybody want to comment
As a Canadian, we always buy gas. We go to the States. It's $1 a gallon cheaper. So.
Any ideas on how that would be done?
There's several ways it can be done. Again, was mentioned earlier by Jeff that one of the ways to do it is a bit like what's being done in Europe for a car coming from out of country, and you're buying time, in essence, because it's the easiest way to check the car coming in and out. In countries like Hungary, it's done electronically by reading the number plate or license plate of the car, and then they're checking to see that that car has bought the vignette for the time period. Easy to enforce, very effective, and a good source of collecting revenue from out of state. And that's being done in several countries in Europe, and in addition to doing it for trucks.
Okay, thank you. By the way, that was an outstanding presentation. I'm glad we have the handout. I'd love to get it electronically sometimes. It's easier to read.
As far as I know, the presentations will be available from the Transportation Commission websites and will be downloadable, so you will have copies of the slides. I apologize for the quick run-through.
Good. I'd love to share this with some next question, Jim Whitty. Slide 14 on your presentation, you talk about data destruction.
Yep.
And, I typically would think that any court or lawyers on one side or the other might always want to be able to try to obtain stuff through a subpoena or what have you. How is the data destruction issue going to apply there, or is that codified in any way?
The data destruction requirement is codified in the statute, so anyone involved will have to follow it. including the DOT and the vendors that are account managers. So the data simply will not be available.
Simple enough. I just wonder how long it'll be before some other legislators got to law sustainability for the purposes of this study, and whether or not that could end up becoming a deterrent for the program reform.
Well, these are policy questions that will be addressed at a different time. Right now the trending is trying to protect privacy a little more, so that might happen another decade from now.
If I can, Jim, if I can, let me add to that, because we've come across this in a number of international settings too. And in some cases, their privacy laws are more stringent than the laws that we have on our books today for protecting privacy. And the issue usually comes down to on retention, and we hear a lot of this from the American Civil Liberties Union, that they're against something like cameras being used for capturing license plates, because license plates go into the file and they're never purged in the file. In many cases, what happens is you capture the data for the charge for the monthly bill, and then when the bill is settled, then within a certain time frame, 30 days, then the details are purged, and only the summary is left in the account. And that works two ways. On one hand, it protects the details and someone trying to get into the details of a trip, but more importantly, it also goes back into the revenue accounting. From a consumer protection side, if you don't raise an issue on your current bill and you want to go back 3 months later, that data, if you've paid the bill, is now purged. So, you can't raise an issue about the bill at that time because the only thing left is the summary information.
Now I can hear this. I can actually hear myself. So, well, thank you for that. And again, excellent. Last issue on the, I got this, Jim, from your presentation. I realize the good work you've done in Oregon, which I'm a huge fan of, and of course what's coming along in Washington State. And I'm just wondering if somebody could comment, and I thought of this when Vince's name was brought up, is there any sort of discussion on the national level to where this could end up becoming nationalized that would end up being something that would work for the whole country? It might seem to make it a little bit more simpler, similar to other methods.
I think the answer is yes. I can tell you that the Oregon platform, we're designing it to be flexible, so that actually our aim of Director Garrett of Oregon Department of Transportation is to transfer the Oregon platform to a regional system. Not necessarily exactly the way it is, but it be negotiated with other states to determine what would work as a regional system.
Regional as in like California, Oregon, and Washington?
That would be a place that we could start.
Sure.
I think it should be thought about. Put good technical people to work on it as soon as possible. I think maybe there need to be some demonstrations first, a pilot program in California, perhaps in the state of Washington. But while that's going on, we should think about that. And make it available to and we have this organization, the Western Road Usage Charge Consortium, where we could use that for that purpose.
Is Arizona and Nevada in that by chance?
They are.
They are, okay. Because, those would be the logical 5 states that I would think probably the majority of people travel in and out of.
Yeah. So I think that's something that we ought to think about. I can tell you that moving forward as a group is a lot easier than moving singly as a state. Even California, by itself, it does this a lot. Still, it's harder. If you're moving together, it's a lot easier, I think, moving forward. And because the point isn't starting, the point is getting to a sizable group of taxpayers in your state that's in the system. So moving together, I think, we'll get there quicker.
So just as a quick follow-up, have you done an analysis? I saw your 5% at $1 million. So obviously that number would probably go down further as the number gets larger.
Exactly. What happens is that you get the economies of scale with a private sector approach. With a government approach, costs tend to rise per taxpayer. With a private sector approach, you can actually drive the cost down.
Thank you very much.
We're going to go to Commissioner O'Neill and then Commissioner Inman. Again, if other commissioners would like to ask questions or make comments, just hit your light so that we can see your indicator light on. Commissioner O'Neill?
As usual, good presentation. We've heard from you many times. the one thing about the gas tax is that it automatically distinguishes between vehicles that drive fast and are heavier or lighter, and that is reflected in the cost of the system that they drive over. Have you thought about how those factors, speed and weight, can be somehow measured in this kind of in a road user system? I mean, if you're going to charge by the mile, then it doesn't matter how heavy you are or how fast you're driving, how much wear and tear you put on the system. You're going to pay the same, unless there's some other factor involved in this calculus. How do you?
Yes, in Oregon, we already have the weight distance tax or weight mile tax for heavy vehicles. It's been around for 70-some years, and the heavier.
You're about the only state that has it.
No, we're not. There's 3 other states that have it, but ours is the most robust. And what we've learned is with heavy vehicles, weight really matters a lot. The greater the weight, the greater the damage on the road. With light vehicles, that's not the case. The difference between, say, a 4,000-pound vehicle and a 10,000-pound vehicle that's light, it doesn't matter much as far as the roadways go. That's not a policy. That's a scientific determination. So for light vehicles, policy in the state of Oregon will be to have a single rate for light vehicles.
Light vehicles meaning anything under 10,000 pounds.
Well, it's actually anything under 26,000 pounds.
It's higher.
As far as fuel efficiency goes, a state has to make a decision. Does it want to have all vehicles pay the same rate or not? If it wants to incentivize fuel-efficient vehicles in a revenue system, then you're going to basically duplicate the gas tax problem. And in Oregon, they've decided not to do that. They decided to have that fairness was very important, that we can incentivize fuel-efficient vehicles in other ways, and in fact, states do that, but that the revenue for the roads ought to be fair. And so they've chosen a single rate for all light vehicles.
Why don't we then go to Commissioner? Oh, Jack. Okay, Jack.
Sorry,
thank you.
I just want to add on to that last set of comments from a different dimension. Having worked with this literally around the world, the one thing that we found is that when you're working with a new concept, you have to make it simple. You could add complexity later, as long as you build it in at the start, that it's something you're going to add in later. But for starting it, that's why I started with those basic questions. When somebody asks you, how much will it cost? And what you end up with is an equation that says the miles you drive times this rate times the weight of your vehicle times the environmental rating of your vehicle. It gets to be a very difficult soundbite. And we live in a world of soundbites. We're not talking communications here. We've sort of jumped over that. But a good part of this is communications. And when you have a complex equation to calculate the rate, you get butchered in the press when somebody just says, all I want to know is how much does it cost to go from San Francisco to San Jose? Right. And if you say, well, what type of vehicle do you drive? Is it a hybrid? What's its weight? It gets more complicated as opposed to starting with the simple, well, between here and there is 42 miles times the cent and a half. Here's how much you'll pay. So there's a whole other dimension that we haven't talked about in any of the presentations. I know certainly in working with Jim and in working with the Commission, one of the things that comes out is simplicity. And the simpler you can make it to start with, the easier it is to get at least move forward on the first step. If you start too complex, it's hard to make that first step.
Jack, excellent point. Thank you for clarifying that. We're going to go to Commissioner Inman and then Commissioner Burke. Again, if there are other commissioners, just turn on your indicator light.
Thank you, Chairman. Question I have really goes to the alternative fuel vehicles. In our state, we have a huge push to accelerate the adoption of alternative fuel vehicles. And I think the last time you were down visiting with us, you talked about your pilots were being revenue neutral. So do you envision this upcoming launch to include alternative fuel vehicles? And if so, how is that offsetting tax credit, or why would I sign up if I'm getting a free ride now?
Yeah, Commissioner, the legislature gave us only one way to coax in taxpayers. Those with fuel-inefficient vehicles will receive a fuel tax refund that exceeds their mileage charge. They did not give us another tool, which has been distressing to us because we want a wide assortment of participants. We're examining right now the potential for involving the RUC payers in traffic surveys, so we can pay them for their participation in potentially receiving, say, more detailed data from them. They'd have to consent to giving that to us. If we do that, we may have another incentive for those above the midpoint of fuel efficiency. But yes, we were not given very many tools by the legislature, and so it's kind of tricky.
Well, I think it's important as we all collectively figure out what our future is going to look like, that, you know, the fairness gets in there in terms of we need infrastructure, at least in our state. We need a lot of infrastructure. So, and then I have a question. Do you have existing toll roads that are going to be in the jurisdiction? So are your focus groups coming up with double payment questions?
Commissioner, Oregon does not have any toll roads.
We live in a little different world, I think.
Commissioner Burke?
You may have explained this, but I was trying to get clarified in terms of how you get your exemption from the fuel tax. If it's, you have a card when you don't, so you don't pay it at the pump, or is it returned, and how do they keep track of that?
Yeah. Commissioner, I apologize for going so quickly over this material. I'm trying to jam everything into 30 minutes. The mileage reporting devices that we talk about, of which there are many, many types, can read fuel consumption of the vehicle in addition to counting miles. So all that is reported. And so when you have fuel consumption, you can then apply the rate, the gas tax rate to it to get a fuel tax credit. And we proved this could be done in our second pilot, and it worked very, very well.
So it's a credit that you get back, and if you have the box computes how much fuel tax you've paid.
Well, not at the box. It simply reports this is the fuel consumption since the last reporting. Okay, then you have a fuel consumption number, and on the back-end computer you apply the fuel tax rate to it to get the credit. Then it shows up on the bill. The credit shows up on the bill. It was very easy. We had legislators keeping track of their fuel to make sure that we got it right, and I was nervous, is this going to be right? And it turns out it was. Very, very well done.
Is any of this tax deductible or at any level?
Well, I suppose taxes are tax deductible. Well, I shouldn't give advice, but I used to work in tax law, but taxes are deductible if it, for business purpose or investment purpose.
Okay. Not seeing any questions from our Washington colleagues. I'm going to go to another California colleague, Commissioner Assemi.
Thank you, Chair. So fuel-inefficient cars could get a bigger credit under this scenario. So if you're a gas guzzler, you could actually make money off the system.
Commissioner, that is correct under the volunteer program. Right. Now, what happens with policy going forward? Right. Different question. But under this volunteer program, that's right. And in fact, that was the intention of Senator Starr, who put this bill in the legislature. Senator Starr noted something I have also noted, that the biggest opponents to road use charging tend to be those with fuel-inefficient vehicles. It may not make logical sense, but they're emotive about it, okay? They're emotional. And so he thought the better way to handle that is to actually get them to experience the system, realize this is no big deal. So this is a strategic decision made by Senator Starr when writing the legislation to actually to coax in the fuel-inefficient vehicles. We can't take all of them because the group is segmented. 1,500 of our 5,000 no more than 1,500 can be below 17 miles per gallon, and between 17 and 22, another 1,500, and then above above 22 the rest. So, but yeah, it's a strategic move.
Any other questions or comments from either commissioner delegation?
I'd just like to ask one question of Jeff. Jeff, the Western Coalition, is this funded partially by the private sector, or is it all coming from the state governments in one way or the other?
Well, sorry, I don't know if this is on, 100% state DOTs,
Okay.
although the source of funding that's most common is actually not state dollars, but federal research dollars that's held at the federal level but allocated to each state.
Okay, let's continue the conversation then. Rima Griffith?
Mr. Chair, I ask your leave so that I can go to the airport and get back to preparing for negotiations for tomorrow morning.
Yes, we're going to charge you $0.015 a mile.
All right, thank you.
Thank you again. That was terrific. Rima, welcome again.
Thank you, and thank you for having us. We're really happy to be here today and happy to share a little bit of what's going on in Washington State as we also begin our work in looking at how we may transition as a state from the gas tax to a per mile charge. And I'll wait for my slides to get up. I haven't memorized them yet. Do I just hit this, or they're not? Do you guys have hard copies of the slides? Apparently it's not loaded on the laptop, so if you have hard copies.
Here we go. Yes, we have. And Rima, we do have hard copies up here.
Okay.
I don't know if they're in the back for those in the audience, but we certainly have them on the dais.
Would you like me to proceed then, assuming people can look at hard copies, or would you like to wait a minute to see if your staff has them?
Why don't we take a 5-minute break then?
Okay.
And allow, hopefully, the time for technology to catch up. It's 10:30. We're going to start again at 10:35. Thank you.